joining us right now, writer and commentator David Slack. David, good evening to you.
Hey, Pat, long
Doing
time
well?
no chat.
Yeah, I was just
The
thinking the
COVID
same
kept
thing.
me away from you.
Yeah, how you doing? Well, I know it was a pretty rough run for you at COVID. You okay now?
Yeah, it was frustrating. I ducked it until about Labour weekend last year, and then put myself on the Paxlovid right away, and that worked pretty well. Except that then I got what about 1 in 10 people get, which is the Paxlovid rebound.
Yeah, the bounce back.
Yeah, and if that happens, it means that your immune system turns up to do the rearguard action because the Paxlovid didn't clear it all out and doesn't quite know where the keys are and where the car is in the building, and so it all takes a while. And so I just went for week after week after week, just sort of decked, and it was pretty frustrating. And
No
still
good.
now I've got this numb tongue that kind of tells me that things aren't quite right. So
it's good that you're a writer, Danny. So when the numb gets a bit numb, it doesn't affect you that much. And just completely off target. if you if you could go back again, because the Paxlovid is recommended for some people. If you could look back again, would you have still gone with that, or would you have taken your chances more on just the COVID?
Yeah, because I've got a sort of a heart condition. When I say that, I mean 30 years ago I had a couple of heart attacks, and so I have to be kind of careful. I'm kind of mindful that if the ball bounces wrong, it can get a bit catastrophic, and that's the whole idea of Paxlovid, that you just remove the possibility of the extreme adverse outcome from the calculation. So yeah, I'd probably do it again, but I don't know. I might actually weigh it a bit next time.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting those decisions we make. Like I got it in December for the first time, but I just had my booster, and I kind of I flew through it pretty well. Like I was back doing the show kind of maybe 3 nights after I got it. There were some things I had exhaustion and I had spinning heads and stuff, but I was mostly okay. And I put it to, and I wonder if I hadn't had that booster, would I have? Because that means my immunity this year was like, go. But we can't tell this. But look, anyway, let's not get distracted. There's enough for you and I to get distracted about.
Today was a big day.
It was a big day. I was actually thinking, the amount that I've worked in radio when there's been massive stories, I'm like, today is one of those days. And it was massive. And like, I know most people don't believe this, but the biggest news of the day was the sun was out in Dunedin. No, that wasn't that was the second biggest news story. So why don't you just, for people who don't know, you have worked as a speechwriter for Jeffrey Palmer and for Jim Bolger, so both sides of the kind of house, I guess you'd say. So you've been, I'm interested to get your intake as well. You've been behind the closed doors before, I don't know if these kinds of speeches, but some kinds of speeches have been delivered. So we'd love to get your input on what we saw today, but also you're an astute political commentator on what this means for New Zealand. The floor is yours, sir.
Sure. One interesting point she used in there was that people always, when this happens, and obviously this was sort of alluding to John Key in particular, people say, well, but what's the real reason? And she said, what I've just told you, that's the real reason. And I both accept that, but also wonder if nonetheless what she has described minimizes what went into that calculation. And by that I mean that the vitriol, the hate, the death threats, the unrelenting hostility that has developed over these last year in particular, because it was about this time last year that the occupation was getting going.
Yeah,
that has to wear on anybody. She has real steel, but she also has a great deal of humanity and empathy, and all of those things add up to finding that pretty tough. And also, you would have to be worried about your personal safety. There is a level of menace attaches to this that is really worrisome. And when you've got a young child to consider in that calculation as well, that's really meaningful. So I think when she talks about not having much left in the tank. I absolutely believe that. I thought more than once last year looking at her, God, I couldn't blame you if you wanted to pull the pin on this. And it really has been hugely demanding.
What
Um,
you're describing about the tank, as you're describing it, I'm thinking,
mm,
I mean, I spend a lot of time in Northland, so understand the concept of conserving water in a tank, right? Um, and you can use up the water in the tank for good, solid, real, wholesome purposes like showers and drinking water and that kind of stuff. Or you can get someone with a machete come and take to your tank,
right, yeah.
or with guns to blow holes in the side of your tank. That will also empty the water, but so much harder to refill out. And what you're describing is someone, a group, a feeling has attacked that tank to empty it, as opposed to maybe natural attrition, which maybe most politicians hit at some stage.
No, that's absolutely true. And actually, I was just lining one thing up to quote to you, but I'm just going to jump to another one too that somebody shared with me today. That this, you know, this is here. This is just quoting somebody who texted me, and it might all be imagined, but the person who supplied it is extremely reliable, and if they are providing this,
Have we got
you
have we got a scoop? Have we? Are you giving us a scoop? Are you?
no,
My
I mean
unknown source.
it's yeah, a reliable unnamed source, but he's saying that in Tyrone, and I presume this was over the holidays. Doesn't really matter when it was anyway. That they saw a woman telling Jacinda, how rough how rough are you with the language here? Shall I go
You
full
you
noise or
can
shall I
what
censor?
go full noise.
Okay, this is what this woman said to Jacinda in a store in Tyra. Fuck you, you ruined my life, you cunt. Fuck off, horseface. This was in a local shop in
Good
front of Neve.
lord.
In front of Neve. You know,
Yeah.
it's unconscionable the the readiness of people to um, throw unbelievable invective at somebody who has been doing and I'll now go to the thing that I had lined up before that I was going to share with you that I wrote in the newsletter today, um, because I think that this is the essence of what I think is unfair, that essentially the people who have given this the least thought and made the most noise have kind of prevailed here. And it is, I had a character saying, I still can't get over how fast people managed to forget what was at stake and how decent a job the government, did of getting us through. And then all of a sudden, every inconvenience gets made into a political travesty.
Yeah.
And we seem to have managed to so swiftly forget how uncertain it was in those first few weeks. And you and I, we talked at around that point about it, about just how unsure it all looked. And we didn't know, none of us knew. We didn't have a bloody clue.
Mm.
And the 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 assurance of the money sustaining everybody to keep things on an even keel was hugely meaningful. The way in which and we talked about this before we came on air indirectly, the messaging they had couldn't have been clearer and was really
At that time. Yeah.
at that time was really valuable. And it meant that the sense that everybody might have otherwise had, that there was no telling where this thing would go. And let's not forget that either. We didn't know much about that virus at that point. Was it going to escalate? Was it going to start cutting people down? Were people going to die, in the way they did in 1918? And so all of that they managed so well, but in the calculation, it meant that you were choosing least bad option, and that meant that certain things were, unpalatable options, and that meant not being able to come and go from this country in the way that we take for granted. But it amounted not to ruining your life, as that person was alleging in the shop in Tairoa to Jacinda Ardern. It meant making things difficult so that you had to adjust, and making it possible for you to adjust. This ruining your life, ruining my life shit, I've heard many times now from people, and it is histrionic, and it's unfair, and it's certainly unreasonable to say that Jacinda did this to me.
It's also the victim card though. And like one of the things that frustrates me most about this whole apartheid argument around this is if you're black
Mm,
in South Africa, you don't have a fucking choice. You know, you have a choice to whether you are going to be excluded from society via mandates or not. So
Yeah.
there's no victims in this classroom, as Michelle Pfeiffer said in Dangerous Minds. There's no fucking victims in this classroom.
Right.
If you want to
Yeah.
put your opinion on dodgy science above what's being said, fine. That's the choice you make. There's no victims in this classroom. You know, so
That's
yeah,
right.
those people, you have ruined my life. It's like, I'm a victim. I had no
Mm,
autonomy. Yes, you did. You had all the autonomy. I had a teacher on who lost their job,
mm,
and she said, I said, well, it's a choice, and she says, no, they're not. They're forcing it. So I said to her, oh, really? So when are you getting your vaccine? And she says, well, I'm not. And I'm like, because it's not a choice. Yeah, yeah, because because you're choosing
exactly.
not to get
Exactly.
it. So I don't buy any of that. But like I was thinking as
Yeah.
well, what she said today, which we played the full thing earlier,
Mm,
it is. Let's just take it as true. But is it true because she's come to the end, or is it true because those machetes have been attacking the water tank? So in other words, has this been she's been driven to this part to have to get out? So even though it is truthful that she's leaving on her terms, if it wasn't for the histrionics in society, she probably, who knows, we no sliding doors, but wouldn't be. Um,
yeah.
and it's just made me think, what that means moving forward. Which I'd like to actually. Is there anything you want to share with us about delivering those messages? As I said, speechwriter
Yeah.
for Palmer
Mm.
and Bolger. What happens behind the scenes when you have to deliver? And you may have not been involved with exactly this, but these sort of earth-shattering, news-breaking events. What happens? How is that delivered? How do you go through the process of getting the wording right and stuff? Share us something on that.
So, when I think about it now, at the point that Jeffrey Palmer was leaving, um, he was just saying all of that himself. Nobody was scripting anything.
Right.
Because actually the calculations are all done then, there isn't you're not sort of setting one thing off against another, and I might be mistaken about this, and I should full disclosure, I should say that I have been involved once or twice in this term, helping with messaging for this Prime Minister too, but only a little bits on a time or on one or two occasions.
I hope you weren't involved with the UN one where she said that free speech could be a weapon of war, because that was another time they screwed up their messaging. Please tell me you weren't involved with that,
Yeah,
David. No.
not involved.
Oh, good. Good.
Um, but the impression I got from that involvement was that she has very clear ideas, as do many political orators.
Yep.
And it's not so much that they don't have a clear idea about messaging, it's more that they're looking for fresh ideas that might just make things shine a bit more. But
Yeah.
they've got fundamentally they know where they're wanting to take it. And so, you know, anything you heard today, I would say was a full expression of what she had been thinking and where she was taking it. And we know this about her messaging too, that she's always found a way to present it in a way that doesn't unduly blame anybody,
Yeah.
um, do anybody down. It might be implicit in it, but she doesn't unduly take a swing when that's not necessary, and she also, I think, knows that people will draw their conclusions anyway. It's not, you don't need to say everything for people to get the point.
Yeah.
um and I think the truth is that it's both of those things. It is run out of tank, but it's also, as you say, somebody has taken a fucking machete to the tank so the water's come out faster. Or
Yeah.
indeed, we're mixing
Yeah.
metaphors and hydrocarbons here, but you know what I mean. It's uh, you. Nobody could blame her for saying at this point this would be the right thing to do. And furthermore, and she hasn't said this, but you have to figure that this was on her mind, that her presence would have been extremely divisive in this election campaign. This would have been a horrible election campaign with
Yeah.
everybody who hates her throwing themselves at her, and possibly a very dangerous one. You had an election in the UK where um, a candidate died, was attacked and murdered. This happens in Westminster democracies. Well, sure as fuck happens now, and as we saw in Christchurch, it happens with absolutely murderous intent. So there was that danger too. But, from a strategic point of view, this takes something very inflammatory out of the equation and leaves Labor to fight on. Sure, reduced kind of firepower in a certain sense. She had star power like none other, but also she had become an enmity magnet. So do these, where does that calculation take you? Maybe
Well,
you're actually
this is exactly the next conversation that's now going to fill up the next 7 days of talkback. Who is next? Now, News Hub has come out. I'm not picking on News Hub because that's just the headline that's come out. Michael Wood, Chris Hipkins, and Kerry Allen. I think they've got it wrong. Michael Wood, I think possibly is of those three is my top choice, but they're missing who the person should be. Now, you and I started talking about Kerry Allen beforehand. You were thinking that Kerry Allen could be a choice. Go on, give us your rationale before I make myself look like the most misogynistic, patriarchal piece of shit in the land.
By all means. What I have in mind in particular was and now I've forgotten the civil defence disaster that this actually involved. Was it
Right.
the volcano? No. Look, it's secondary. Whichever disaster it was, it ran all day, and she was suddenly there, fronting and being compelling in her reassuring and capable presence. I think that she has a means of communicating right across the spectrum of our society in a way that few politicians do. I think she's very quick. She's very sharp. She has all the humanity that the current Prime Minister does. And I also think she has the potential to present further dimension that you don't see yet when she steps up in exactly the same way that Jacinda did once she took over from Andrew Little.
Yeah.
I know you're going to disagree with a great deal of this, but I think she's got a rare quality, and that can be enough to overcome the dimension that I know you're concerned about, which is that we've got a bunch of misogynistic, conservative middle New Zealanders who will say, "No, fuck that! I'm not voting for another woman. I want a man."
Well, okay. So thanks for throwing me under the bus.
Let me throw one more thing in.
Okay, sure.
How cool would it be for Marnie Dunlop to be the first lady? That's as cool as Hillary Clinton, man.
Tell you something, and I'm just looking at it from a numbers point of view. If they want to win this year, Kerry Allen is the wrong choice for all those horrible reasons you've just said, but those are still reasons. There are a group of people who are moving away from Labor. There are some of them that are, unfortunately, that bloody woman. And if you want to win this year, not my personal position, but Kerry Allen is the wrong person, I think. Now, if you're looking at 2026 and beyond, and you are going to say, yep, we're just going to take this hit and we're going to end up on 28% and we're going to move for the next one and National's going to win, sure, fine, if that's the plan that they go with. Tell you, and I thought the two people that would be, I think Michael Wood is up there, one of they suggested. Now, as I say this out loud, I was a little bit worried that I don't think he's announced that he's going to resign. Imagine if the person I'm about to say has said he's one of those ones that are going to skip out. I don't think it is. As we look at the actual the list, I mean, you go through the list and it gets pretty. He said Kelvin Davis is no. Grant Robertson said no. Jacinda's going, and then you look at some people who have been there for a while. David Parker, Little's had a crack. Hipkins, they've touted. I don't think so. I reckon, especially if you want to get that group of people, and you see where I'm stopping and slowing down.
Oh God, are you going to Kieran McNulty because he said he won't?
I think Kieran McNulty is the guy.
Yeah, no, he has said he won't.
I think Kieran McNulty is the guy. Well, man, we'll see what happens after 7 days.
Yeah.
I reckon he pitches. Remember, I'm just talking about winning this year. He pitches to provincial New Zealand like pretty much no one else can.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that's needed in the Labor Party leadership if they want to win this year. Because be it good, bad, or indifferent, the groundswells of this world have been able to turn a sector of that society against Labor. Maybe they always were, but putting a provincial ute driving bloke in there for this year is messaging that I think would help them. So my tick is for Kieran McNulty. He's the guy. He's the guy.
He's a whole lot more quick
No
thinking
baggage.
and informed than Christopher Luxon,
Yep.
and that's the other thing to think about here. You know, once it's an election, it's not it's not a contest between whoever the new leader is and the one they've replaced.
Yep.
It's between them and Luxon.
Yeah.
How do they look against him?
Yeah, for sure.
And so yeah, you've kind of persuaded me a little bit here, Pat.
He's the guy. Look, and look. The reason I sound, people are going to say misogynist, patriarchal. You're right, but that's not because that's what I believe. That's because I'm taking a step back and looking what would be best for them to win this year, and that, whether we like it or hate it, plays a part. He's the guy. Now, you brought him up by name. I really would like to go, just to wrap up with. I'd really like to go and get your thoughts around Mr. Luxon's tweet. For people who haven't seen it yet, on behalf of the National Party, I offer to Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern our thanks for her service to New Zealand. She has given her all to this incredibly demanding job, and I wish her and her family all the very best for the future. Thank you, Jacinda. I mean, for a start, maybe I'm being a little bit facetious about the position. Thank you, Prime Minister. Might have been better at the end, maybe, just, the office. But anyway, I think that the rhetoric that I've heard from Christopher Luxon for the past 12 months has done nothing but add to those machetes that we talked about in the thing, that away from them. That just feels a little bit more than what's the right word? Patronizing?
It is 99% weasel. You know, when we
Yeah.
say weasel word, what we mean is that when a weasel gets at an egg, it sucks all the egg out of it, and all you've got left is a shell. And that's what's meant by this. The words are there, but there is nothing inside that shell. And it's meaningless because what he actually has done what he has failed to do by inaction is stop so many people who could have been discouraged from using invective that has landed us where we are. And he's all good with that, and that's not good. Not good.
Yeah, I really hope. I mean, you and I talked about this beforehand, and I've mentioned this. In fact, I've made a clip on it today talking about how shit House Labor is at their messaging. I hope that they get this right for the sake of people on the left, and they don't just, I don't know, virtue signal what they think should be, as opposed to actually stop and think, how do you win? Because that's not what the left asks very well. The right goes, how do we win? The left goes, how do we make this world a better place? Which is a great thing, but if you don't win first, you can't make the world a better place. So Labour Party, if you're listening, how do we win? And as horrible as it is to sound, maybe some of the best and brightest that might be fantastic people in 3 years from now, if you want to win this year, aren't the people to go with. Just my humble opinion.
Yeah.
That's all, David.
The cost of living right now, National Party have grasped. It really weighs on everybody's mind, and so that's why you hear so much about it. They have to find messaging for a starter that turns that around, because this is actually on the wealthy, the taking advantage of windfall profits, the taking advantage of healthy bottom lines. All of that could be changed. It would not be to the advantage of wealthy people, but it would be to the advantage of the hard-pressed Kiwi mum and dad that Christopher Luxon purports to be concerned about. So just for starters, the messaging of that, I think, could be flipped, and you need to whiteboard that for a day.
Yeah. No, look, we talked about this. We talked about this last night, and you and I talked about it before we came on. When National says we have the CEOs, the messaging from Labor is, yes, you can have the CEOs, we'll have the workers. That's actually where they need to be. They don't need to be, oh, no, the CEOs love us too. No, fuck that. The messaging is, yeah, you can have the top 10%. You can have the elites. You can have the Graham Harts giving you $250,000. We'll go see the workers on the factory floor who can't afford to give us anything, but we'll rally them, get their votes, and that's who we're fighting for. And if they don't get that right, I mean, that's the Labor of old, then they're doomed for eternity.
Actually, you scrolled past Michael Wood to get to Kieran McNulty, but he has been doing some pretty good messaging along those terms.
They're my
And
two choices. Those are the two
yeah,
I came to. I was Kieran's number one, Michael's number two. And if
yeah,
Kieran
yeah,
says no, Michael's number two. But I think honestly, especially in that provincial kind of cred, gumboot wearing ute. And look, it sounds horrible, but I understand messaging. That's what it is. He's the
yeah,
guy.
sure.
He's the
Yeah,
guy.
you're not wrong.
David Slack, tell the people about Subslack.
Oh, yes. Do please come and enjoy the daily newsletter called More Than a Fielding, which you can find at substack.substack.com. I write a snappy thing that comes out at 4:30 each day that looks at what's been going on. It's a kind of a look in the rear vision mirror to see what we've hit what we've hit now and what's bouncing on the road behind us, you might say. But it's mostly about life here and politics in particular. I try not to make every issue about rail and bikes, but it contains both. And also quite a lot about our absolutely dysfunctional Ponzi scheme fucking property market. But there are all kinds of things, and also there's a whole bunch of nostalgia. And on Thursdays there's the school journal, the Thursday school journal, where much of the action takes place at the fictional Kiakaha Primary School, where all kinds of cool people do interesting things.
There you go. People want to find out more about you. Subslack.substack.com. David, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I'm very glad you're, shall we say, coming to the very tail end of your COVID, because we want you on again. We want to chat again. It's always fun. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Likewise, Pat. It's been a pleasure. Cheers, man.